Hi, I'm Maggie, and I will be talking today about HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, in the southern United States. I'm going to cover how the pathogen works, how it spreads between people, and some of the cultural factors involved in treating it. Just a slight disclaimer, because HIV can be sexually transmitted, I will be covering some sexual related topics. HIV is a retrovirus, which means it uses RNA to insert its genome into the genetic material of a host cell. The HIV virus is surrounded by an envelope protein. Then within that, there are two layers of proteins called a matrix and a capsid. And inside of that, there are two copies of the viral RNA and enzymes including reverse transcriptase, integrase, and protease. HIV infects helper T cells. The HIV envelope protein binds to CD4 and CCR5 proteins on the outside of T cells, and then the viral and cell membranes fuse, which lets the matrix and capsid get inside of the cell. Then the virus's reverse transcriptase converts the viral RNA into viral DNA using nucleotides it picks up from the host cell. Next, the integrase from HIV picks up the viral DNA, takes it inside of the nucleus, and inserts it into the host cell's genetic material. When the cell's RNA polymerase reads the DNA to make mRNA, it also accidentally reads the viral DNA, which has been inserted, and then that mRNA goes to ribosomes, which will end up producing the proteins needed for HIV. The proteins collect near the surface of a cell. It will bud off into the start of a new virion, and then the protease within HIV will cut up the proteins so that they can then assemble the envelope, matrix, and capsid. And then you have a new virus ready to go infect more cells. T cells, especially helper T cells, regulate the body's immune response. It's really bad when HIV attacks T cells because it essentially removes the body's adaptive immune response. You need to get tested to know if you have HIV because a lot of the symptoms can overlap. If you are sexually active, it's important to get tested for STIs regularly. There are 3 stages of HIV. In the first stage, which is after the initial infection, the symptoms can be flu-like, including fever, chills, rash, night sweats, muscle aches, sore throat, fatigue, swollen lymph nodes, and mouth ulcers. Stage 2 of HIV is when the virus stops multiplying at nearly as fast of a rate, and stage 2 can actually last for 10 to 15 years, even without treatment. Stage 3 is when HIV starts getting serious. The symptoms can include rapid weight loss, recurring fever, night sweats, extreme and unexplained tiredness, prolonged swelling of the lymph glands, diarrhea, sores in the mouth, anus, or genitals, pneumonia, red, brown, pink, or purple blotches, memory loss, depression, and other neurological disorders. So, much more serious symptoms. Those symptoms occur because stage 3 of HIV is when it becomes what's known as AIDS, or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Either someone's T cell count is below 200 cells per cubic millimeter of blood, or if they have something called an opportunistic infection, because the immune system is severely damaged when someone has AIDS. Infectious diseases are far more likely to be deadly. Once someone with AIDS develops an opportunistic infection, their life expectancy is less than a year. Now onto the spread of HIV. The R0 value of HIV is about 1. HIV is different from a lot of the infectious diseases that we've discussed It can't be spread through everyday contact because the virus cannot survive for very long outside of the human body. HIV is spread through bodily fluids. These fluids must come in contact with either a mucous membrane, damaged or broken skin, or by being injected directly into the bloodstream. HIV is most commonly spread through penetrative sex without physical protection or through sharing of syringes or needles. Anal sex is particularly dangerous in terms of HIV because the lining of the rectum is very thin, and also the skin on the anus and rectum is more likely to tear than on a vagina, so HIV could enter the body. Physical barriers are the first way to avoid HIV, which include using protection such as condoms and dental dams during sex, and never sharing or reusing needles and syringes. PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, is an HIV medication that people in higher risk groups will take when they are HIV negative because it can prevent an infection from taking hold if they are exposed to the virus. One kind of antiretroviral drugs, which include CCR5 blockers, prevent HIV from entering the cells by keeping it from binding to CCR5 and CD4 receptors. And also, there is a kind of drug called NNRTIs, which stop the viral reverse transcriptase, so the viral RNA can't be made into DNA, and NRTIs that make the viral DNA uncopyable. HIV treatment becomes effective in about 6 months, and in a lot of patients, it actually gets their viral load low enough that they cannot be detected as having HIV if they have an HIV test, and that also means that they cannot pass on the virus to other people. Although anyone can get HIV, there are certain groups where infections are more prevalent, including gay and bisexual men, trans women who have sex with other AMAB people, and people who inject drugs. I decided to focus on HIV in the deep south of the United States, which is states including Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. Over half of new HIV diagnoses are in the South, even though the South only has about a third of the US population. In 2014, 54% of people living in the South who were diagnosed with HIV were African American, and of that group, 60% were men attracted to other men. There are a number of cultural factors that contribute to the current HIV epidemic. First of all, the South is generally politically conservative, which means that there's a lot less government-funded healthcare. The South has the highest poverty rate of the country. Michael Sang, an AIDS researcher at the University of Alabama, said that in the rural South, people are less likely to get healthcare in general, so even if someone has HIV, they might be less likely to go get treatment. There's a lot of homophobia compared to other areas of the US, which is in part due to traditional values, as well as a higher rate of evangelical Christianity. Also, from the homophobia and from the history of HIV, there is a lot of stigma associated with being HIV positive in the South, and especially in small communities in the South, where everyone knows who everyone is, HIV positive people can be reluctant to get treatment because they don't want everyone in their town to know that they are HIV positive. There are currently various solutions in place to deal with HIV in the southern US. Many people believe that a step to solving the HIV issue is including education about HIV and prevention in sex education. In 2017, the company Gilead Sciences pledged to spend $100 million over the next 10 years on fighting the HIV epidemic in the South.
The CDC also has a specific plan involving prevention and treatment.
Stakeholders. Who does this really matter to? People assigned male who have sex with other people assigned male, which could include gay and bi men, as well as transgender women and non-binary people. Next, government officials in the South. If people want to get support from the people they represent, it would be really good if they support HIV treatment and research, because then people feel that they are being represented and their elected officials care about them and their needs. Then just anyone living in the South, because it really sucks if your family members or friends are sick and dying of HIV/AIDS. Finally, people in low-risk groups living in the South, because people not getting sick is always a good thing.
I came up with a few solutions based on the bioethical principles of
respect for persons, justice, and maximizing benefits, minimizing harm. 4 solutions that are possibilities are universal health care to provide access to HIV treatment, which would go with maximizing benefits, minimizing harm. Next option is companies donating lots of money to support research and treatment efforts, which I think fits more into the justice category, because that really is targeted specifically at helping people with HIV. One possible thing that San Francisco is doing is that there's a program where people can start taking antiretrovirals the day after they're diagnosed with HIV. Finally, a respect for persons solution would be letting people do whatever they want in terms of unprotected sex and drug use, and also letting pharmaceutical companies set high prices on antiretrovirals so that they can make a lot of money. The solution that I think works best fits mainly into the justice category, but then as a result also minimizes harm, because HIV really does mostly affect specific populations. So treating those groups can then protect the overall population in the South. First, there should be affordable access to prevention and treatment options for HIV, which means PrEP and antiretrovirals should be covered by health insurance, and there should be price caps set on those drugs so that anyone can purchase them whether or not they have insurance. Also, there need to be needle exchanges so that there's no transmission through drug injections, and condoms and other protection should be freely available. And this is really because people are going to have sex and take some risks, and people are going to use drugs, and there's no reason to throw those people out because of that. Instead, keeping people safe in ways that we can is what should be done. That's why this makes the most sense to me. And also, in terms of the larger populace of the South, education is essential, which would include teaching people how to avoid HIV and teaching about what HIV is in general and the history of the virus, because more information will help dismantle the stigma associated with HIV in the South.
Here are my sources, and also I use the basic CDC website a lot, and it's really useful if you want to learn more about HIV.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a bit about HIV and the current epidemic in the southern United States.